insurers are paying for medication because it will do really hard bargaining. It will also put money in up front by what we call the Medical Research Council, and it will buy advanced rights on pharmaceuticals. It'll say we will do the seed funding for that, but we're going to get the medication when it comes online at less than other people are going to get it. It's a very different system. And when we're talking about scale, I had a sort of benign lump removed from my scalp a while ago. Went to the Royal London Hospital, big hospital in East London. Day surgery unit there. You arrive at 7 o'clock in the morning. Matron comes out, feisty young woman, shouting this room. There's about 300 of us in there. She's going, I need to get you all through. The next shift is coming through at 12 o'clock. We have 37 operating theatres running this morning for day surgery. You're through, we've got the next at 12 and the next at 4. So they're effectively running 3 sets of 37 theatres during that day. That was 1 theatre suite, that's just the day surgery unit. They've got 4 other theatre suites in that hospital. So it's about scale as well. This is kind of mass medicine. So you're pushing through the numbers, which reduces your costs as well. But it's not just all about curative medicine. Right at the beginning we were talking about prevention, weren't we? Now everyone has probably heard about, we've talked about Lister. Think of all the lives he saved by just keeping us free from bacteria. Pasteur, about making our milk fresh. Marie Curie and the work she's done around cancer care and radiation. But who's heard of this gentleman? Can you see his blue plaque over there? August Wilhelm von Hofmann. Anyone ever heard of him? I've only ever had one group. I've been doing this 5 years, one group ever. One day someone else will go, yes, he's my hero. But August Wilhelm von Hofmann we should have heard of, because he's the father of preservatives. Now, he was working in the early 19th century. He was brought here from Germany to head up the Royal Society of Chemistry. At this time, the biggest industry in the world, believe it or not, was fabric, was cloth. That were around the world. I mean, that's why America had the cotton plantations, because to bring the cotton, this is an industry that ruined the lives of millions of people and made the fortunes of a small elite of people. And one of the things they were very worried about was keeping the cotton from going off, because they were bringing the cotton back to this country to process and make it into cloth, like this linen I'm wearing here and other cloths. And so he was looking at how to keep cloth fresh. And he developed a whole class of chemicals called sorbates. But sorbates would go on not to keep cloth fresh, but to keep food fresh. Now if you look at the end of any ingredient list, those of you who are interested in your food, when you get to the very end, calcium sorbate, potassium sorbate, sodium, they are always there. Do you know they are so ubiquitous that the FDA in the States and our regulators here in Europe, they don't have to tell you, but they are in your fresh meat steak when you buy that, and your fresh chicken, and your fresh fish. They're in your dairy products. They don't have to tell you because they're in everything. And these sorbates, they keep your food fresh for 4 times longer without refrigeration and 16 times longer with refrigeration. Why is it so important? Now, if you're a dull old medical historian like me, one of the greatest sources of information is this thing called the Bills of Mortality. These are these books which week after week would document in a big city like London who's died and what have they died of. And we're kind of obsessed with all these what I call the glamour diseases, you know, plague, smallpox, cholera. But you know what? Week in, week out, about 25 to 30% of deaths are basically people dying of food poisoning. Now, how alien again is that to us today? You get an E. coli outbreak or a salmonella outbreak, it's on the news these days. 25 to 30% of the deaths were caused by food poisoning, right up until preservatives, and then after preservatives, refrigeration. That's a massive change in our culture. And we should remember him because this is the guy who gave us the preservatives. And why don't we? Because they started to utilize his advances after he died. So history perpetuates, don't worry, he made a lot of money out of preserving fabrics during his lifetime. So he was rich enough. But history plays tricks on us because he should be up there with all these other people. There are other people who are forgotten as well. Now this building, and there's no blue plaque for this, but this had the first offices of an organisation which still exists called the British Pregnancy Advice Service. And this was the first service that worked in a very controversial area of public health. More controversial in the US than it is here. This was the first organisation in this country after the legalisation of abortion and termination to give advice to women about that option in their life. No plaque for them. But when we go around the corner, we'll be walking past it, we will see a plaque to a woman called Mary Stopes. And what we'll see is a building that was the world's first birth control clinic. I'll just point it out to you as we go past. 1921 she established it. 1924. Remarkable woman. She was Dr. Mary Stopes, but she wasn't a medical doctor, because people outside medicine can have this influence. She was a paleobotanist. Any idea what a paleobotanist is? She looked in fossils to see the history of plants. She was the first woman in this country to get a PhD and became the first female professor. She was born Mary Stopes, she died Mary Stopes, but she was married twice. Now, she lived between 1860 and 1950s. That didn't happen very often. She divorced her first husband because he was jealous of her success as an academic. She divorced him on the basis of non-conjugation of the marriage. I'll let you go and look that up if you don't know what it is. Yeah, I think people are nodding and knowing on this. But basically, this was the most merciful thing she could do. There were only 3 ways for a woman to divorce a man. Men were allowed to divorce women on the grounds of insanity, but women couldn't divorce men on the grounds of insanity. I think they thought there'd be too many divorces if they allowed that. It was only bankruptcy, wife beating, or non-conjugation of the marriage. So in a way, this was the kindest way she could divorce him. But then what she did next was a little bit more peculiar. She wrote a book called How to Have a Happy Marriage. And in it, what she did, she said, if you had all the things I didn't have in my marriage, if you did everything different, you'd have had a great marriage. She becomes a bit of a celebrity. This academic woman, bit of a celebrity. Then she meets her second husband, a man called Verdon Roe. Now he is hugely forward-looking. This is 1913, and he owns an aircraft manufacturing business. Now there ain't many planes in the world in 1913, and he's the man who's got the interest in birth control, because his workforce is predominantly female, and what he sees is their lives destroyed by these 10, 12, 14 births that these women are having. Because these women are also the chief breadwinners of their family. Once they lose their highly skilled jobs, the whole family's life is destroyed. I'm sure he's got an eye on his bottom line because he's training these women and then they're leaving him and he's having so, not entirely altruistic, but nevertheless. And then what persuades his wife, what persuades Mary Stopes into this is 2 personal tragedies. First is, well, this is not a tragedy. She gets married to Verdon Roe, great. She gets pregnant, not a tragedy. But during the course of that pregnancy, she's carrying the baby late. And she's sent to what's called a confinement hospital in these days. Then it transpires she's going to have a breech birth. She's read widely. You can imagine this is a super intelligent woman. And she wants to go into labour on her knees. This is the received medical idea at the time. They disagree. They say no. A fight breaks out. Ends up with them physically restraining her. And the trauma that ensues, the baby is stillborn. Now she accuses them, she says that the medical professionals killed her baby. They turn around and say, no, you had syphilis. That's why the baby was stillborn. She then has to go through all the really invasive investigations to establish that she didn't have syphilis. She didn't have syphilis. But what it persuades her of is that women need reproductive rights and decision and choice all the way from conception through to childbirth and beyond. So she's instrumental in setting up an organisation that would come to be known as the National Childbirth Trust, which is all about giving women choices about labour, helps them with prenatal care, antenatal care, breathing exercises, has all the toddler groups, and now is instrumental in identifying postnatal depression in women and giving them help then. And also about setting up these birth control clinics. She's setting them up with money that she and her husband are raising. And these birth control clinics are advising on contraception at a time when it's not just the Catholic Church that doesn't approve of contraception, but every church and every politician. Everyone is turned against her. She doesn't set them up in nice middle-class polite areas. I know this looks like a nice area now. This was the red light district of London at the time. It's called North Soho. So the prostitutes would bring their clients back from Soho proper, and they had their cheap lodging houses up here. So she knew the women who were most vulnerable. She set up 14 clinics in her lifetime, and the others were in naval dockyards and port towns, targeting the help where it was most needed. But she never, even though most British people would associate her name with terminations, never spoke in favour or against them. We don't know what her views were. It might be that she didn't approve. It might be that she thought if she spoke in favour of them, it would encourage people to seek back street abortions with all the terrible dangers involved in that. It might be that she thought, hey, divorce, not change my name, first university female professor, 14 birth control clinics. there's only so much one person can do. We just don't know. But what happened is that after she passed away, the clinics closed down, but then another organization grew up, took her name, and they started to offer that advice. That organization works in 45 countries around the world and sees over 4 million women a year now. But only in the minority of that countries does it offer advice about termination. In the majority of those countries, it's still about birth control. In India, where it sees the most number of people, it's solely involved in birth control. Here in the UK, when we go past the clinic in a minute, I'll be very surprised on a Saturday if there'll be nobody outside protesting or demonstrations. If there are, they will be silent. They will be at least 10 meters apart from one another, and then only 2 on one side of the road, 1 on the other, and a maximum of 3 in total. That's the law. And they're not allowed to talk to anybody going in or out of the clinic. And if they break any of those regulations, they're committing a crime, interfering with a person seeking medical attention, and they can be prosecuted. So if there's anybody there, they'll be just holding their rosary beads and the Virgin Mary in their hand, and that's it. There's been no attempt to change the law on terminations and abortion in this country for over 20 years, other than to look again at the point at which you can have by election terminations up to. And that was about 15 years ago now. It's not an issue in the same way in the States. Terminations are available on the National Health Service as a part of our gynecological and clinical services to women. It's a very different situation than in the US. Okay, so we're going to